Welcome to the Go Find Out podcast. I'm Jennifer Jelliff Russell, author, speaker, and entrepreneur, bringing you actionable ideas and interviews with awesome women to help you pursue your dreams and achieve your goals. You can find more episodes of the Go Find Out podcast by visiting gofindoutpodcast.com. Enjoy the show and go find out. Welcome back to the Go Find Out podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Jelliff Russell, and this is episode number 51. On today's show, I interview T.L. Christianson on her journey of becoming an author. But first, let's jump into my personal update. All right, I feel like the last 2 weeks just flew by. I was able to put my new debut romance book up for pre-order, and I set the publishing date to August 5th under the pen name Penny May. I also built a website for that author name, and I set up a mailing list so that people can sign up, and when I'm able to finish it, I will send those on the mailing list a free, steamy short story that's actually told from the perspective of the billionaire bachelor from the book. So kind of fun stuff, and then I'll be able to send out information about when the book comes out and giveaways and fun stuff like that. So I've also finally decided on a name for the book. So it's going to be called Blissful Awakenings, a Courtney Bliss Romance. And I created a fun cover that shows off our billionaire's very sexy abs. So I'm really excited. I really feel like things are coming together on that book and that author name. So feel free to slide over to pennymayromance.com and you can sign up for the free newsletter if you want, or just check it out and let me know what you think. So the other thing that I did in the past 2 weeks is, so I have, my other persona, my Evergrowth coach. It's actually already set up as an LLC, and it has been since 2019. But in this past week, I actually set it up so that I'm a client with the nonprofit that I work for part-time. So as a client, the procurement counselors that I assist sort of as an admin assistant, they can actually help me to find and bid on federal and state contracts, which is pretty cool, actually. And the organization that I work for, so it's called PTAC, which stands for Procurement Technical Assistance Center, and it's actually a nationwide program. So if you have a business or a company that, you're interested in kind of using to bid on federal or state contracts, you should definitely connect with your local PTAC center, and they can help you get started and understand it and make bids and all that fun type jazz. All right, so that is all I have for today for a personal update. Let's go ahead and jump into the interview with T.L. Christianson. Today, I'm speaking with author T.L. Christianson about her journey of becoming a published author with books in urban fantasy and paranormal romance. Welcome to the show, T.L.
Thank you for having me, Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm super stoked to chat with you. Before we really dive in, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm a Colorado native. I'm from Durango, Colorado. I was originally a high school history teacher.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And then stay-at-home mom. And I don't know what else to say. I've been married for about 20 years. I've got grown children. So
nice. And so now I understand that now you're a writer, right? And so kind of how did that kind of come about?
Well, the funny thing is I don't remember a time when I didn't write. I've written my entire life. I wrote my first book when I was about 15.
Okay.
And I just kept writing since then. So if we're talking about when I wrote, I guess, that's kind of that answer. But publishing is a different story. I always looked at it as, almost akin to being a, movie star or professional athlete. I didn't really feel like it was achievable for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had two things that kind of coalesced in my life to come together to push me towards that. One was that I suffered an injury and I was taken to a stroke hospital in Denver, and I was in their intensive or critical care ward for 2 weeks. And so that really made me reassess my life and what I really want from it and what I love to do. And like I said, I've written my entire life. So sorry if I get a little bit emotional.
No, that's fine.
I had this epiphany that this was something that I still needed to do. And if I wanted to change my life's direction, that I should start looking at that and looking more seriously. Now, the other thing that came into a little bit after this was my sister actually writes Regency romance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And she had just gotten her first book published. And she said to me, because I was a homeschooling mom, and I remember there was this one day we were sitting in the library and I was working with my kids, and sitting there writing, and she was sitting there writing, and writing a book, and I'm just messing around, and she's like, "You're writing? What are you writing?" And I read a little bit to her, and she's like, "This is ridiculous. You should be published. You have to go and try to get published." And so she basically put her foot on my back and pushed me through the publishing door,
Nice.
so to speak.
Nice. And so did you kind of go the traditional publishing route from there?
I did. Well, I actually did query, and I was offered contracts from two different publishing houses for my book Crimson.
Okay.
And after talking to my sister, who she had started out traditional, and she was not the happiest with it.
Mm.
And she found that her books, even though they sold less copies as an indie, she made significantly more money
Mhm.
on those books that she had published herself. And so she's like, "Look, I'll steer you to some people because I'm new to indie publishing myself, because it's very different game if you're traditional versus indie." And she said, "So, but just put it on Amazon. Just finish that book, put it on Amazon." And I was just like, okay. I really had no idea what I was doing. I basically hired an editor
Oh, nice.
and had it edited, and found a copy off of a pre-made, you know, website, and um, the rest is history. I mean, it's like night and day what I've learned. It's such a steep learning curve.
Yeah. And now, what was it actually like to write your first book? Because I know that the first book can really be a huge hurdle for first time authors.
Oh, you know what? I'll be honest with you. I wrote several books before I wrote the book that was published.
Okay.
And so for me, because it was more of a hobby, it was like I'd kind of spend like a few months and I'd write a book, and then or maybe I'd forget about it and I'd get bored with it. But when I was really serious about it, I think that's when I remember my sister telling me, she said, "If you're really an author, you write whether you feel like it or not."
Mhm.
um, and and I think that really stuck with me, because then I knew, I had this plan. Like I had put it for pre-order before I finished it, and so I was like, all right, whether I want to or not, I
Right.
need to finish this. But yeah, I don't know. Writing for me has never been like, do I have a muse? I don't really see it like that. It's my escape. It's where I go to. It's the safe place for me. So I can understand like struggling with plot lines and stuff like that, because I mean I do have that problem sometimes where I'm like, oh crud, I've just written myself into a hole.
Right.
But it's definitely my escape, and it's definitely a comfort for me. So I guess that's not something that I can really identify with.
Gotcha. Do you ever find that you have I know for me, my biggest challenge in writing is I have squirrel brain. So every few weeks I have a new idea for a bright and shiny new book idea, right? That I want to do. And it's very hard
Hmm.
to stay, strict with myself and actually write the book that I'm working on now.
I absolutely have that problem. And actually, I know my readers would hate to hear me say this, but like right now, I actually am working on three different books, and it's because I got this like great idea, and I'm like, oh my god, that would be a fabulous spinoff. And then before I know it, I'm like 15,000 words into that, and I'm like,
Right.
no, my readers want the sequel. What am
Right.
I doing, woman? Snap out of it.
Nice.
But I think, yeah, squirrel brain totally. Yeah, I struggle with several autoimmune diseases, and so
Mm,
that's kind of like my biggest hurdle, is along with just having that squirrel brain, which I'm constantly, my brain is turning towards other things, but just dealing. I think that's my biggest struggle with writing, which I guess if we're I'm kind of circling back, is just health, and yeah, just kind of like being able to maintain the focus that I need on my writing.
yeah. No, that makes total sense. Now, when you first started out and you told people that you were writing a book, did you have any like Debbie Downers or like naysayers when you told
Uh
them you were going to write a book?
okay, so I've kind of like two times with this. So the first time was when I was in high school, and
Oh,
I was writing this book, and I didn't really think anything of it. But I'm like writing it, and yeah, people were assholes to me. They were like, "I don't know why you're wasting your time. Nobody's going to publish a high schooler." yada, yada, yada. So I think that that kind of broke my spirit somewhat because I don't think my writing was great because I was a high schooler, but I mean, I've actually been mentoring a few high schoolers who want to get published, and I am encouraging them. And I think, especially with an editor, even if it's just for fun, they should just go ahead and do it. But yeah, so I struggled with that. However, the time that I was getting published, I was in a very friendly environment. I was in a local writing group,
Oh,
and
good.
yeah, this is my my sister. Well, I don't really write romance so much, but this was a romance writing group, but everyone was so welcoming and supporting. And I think that in general, that's how the author community is. It's just a matter of plugging ourselves in. So it was very different, kind of reception when I went to publish, when I surrounded myself with other writers and aspiring authors versus just me being a kid being like, hey, I'm writing this book.
Right. Nice. No, I think it's really important to surround yourself with that sort of uplifting and supportive community. Definitely.
Hmm.
What would you say that your biggest fear was when you were creating either that first book that you were planning to publish, or really any of
Hmm.
your books since then?
I think my biggest thing is I'm a very private person.
Mm,
And I think that we as authors expose a lot of ourselves to the world through our writing. And I think that was kind of the biggest issue for me. It's our deep kind of, not, I don't want to say secret, but just like things that go in our brain that we don't usually share with a lot of people. And my first book was a romance. So there were open door sex scenes in it. And
mhm.
I remember my mother in law, she was like, oh, so I've read your book. I was like, oh my God. And then my mom, I love her, but she reads a lot of romance, but she is very religious. And she's like, I just don't think it's right that you have sex scenes in your book. And I'm like, what are you reading, mom? What else are you reading?
Right,
I
exactly.
love her, but yeah, it's different when it's someone you know.
Right.
I think I'm not ashamed of what I write. Like I'll stand by it, and I'm proud of what I've written. But there are always going to be people who judge you, and
Mhm.
I think I knew this would happen, and it hasn't been so bad from my immediate family, but what ended up being the reality of my fears was actually there are a lot of trolls online, and there is a lot of like kind of hidden bitterness
Mhm.
and hidden bullying that goes on in the author community that I it was completely unexpected for me.
Yeah, it seems to come from random places, I feel like. Um, like,
Yeah.
reviews or comment section on your blog or something like that, it seems.
Yeah, or people they stand behind anonymity, or they use a fake like Facebook account, and that's really what I've run into. And I found that my best way of dealing with this is to just either report them or block them and just ignore it because I don't want to bring up an ugly side of publishing, but there are a lot of people that don't get the success that they're expecting. And I
Mhm.
think that there's a lot of bitterness,
Yes.
and and I feel bad because it's like if somebody comes to me, I will always give them my honest opinion. I'll always give them the best help that I'm able to. But it's hard when I guess I was bullied this last summer
Oh.
by somebody who was actually close to me.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure who it is to this day, but they knew me well enough to know details about my life and details about my writing from
Oh.
an online world. And I think it was just another author who they saw me get this, success, whether it was luck, whether it was my, persistence. But that's a tough one. That's a really tough one. The whole bullying thing, it's been something that the more success I get, the more I'm on the receiving end of that, which is it's just really disappointing, because I am always trying to support other authors, and for me it's not about the competition, it's about the camaraderie.
Mm, mhm.
And I like another author, I want somebody else to send my readers to, because I don't write a book every week, as much as I
Right.
read, and as much as my readers read, they can't just read my things. And so it's like I love knowing other authors and getting to know them, and knowing that there are other books similar that I can send somebody to. I mean, that's the best thing. I love that.
Yeah, and you did that for me, which was fantastic. You featured my first book in your newsletter, which is awesome. So
Yay! Oh, it
I
looks great.
thanks. So, yeah, and it definitely gave me a bump, absolutely, so that's fantastic. Like, I think that that is so
Mm,
important to be supportive. Unfortunately, you're right, there's definitely that dark side.
mhm,
I'm not I think successful enough to be hitting where random people, you know what I mean, are being a bully,
mhm,
but I feel like that's kind of in all areas, you see it even on, like, professional sites like LinkedIn, where somebody in a
mhm,
totally different field suddenly rises to the top and they're suddenly successful, and all of these random troll haters show up.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So unfortunately, it seems like it's just a part of putting anything into the public world.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So now you actually have 8 books published now across 2 series, right? And your 4th book in
Mhm.
your YA fantasy series is coming out soon. What would you say has been your biggest challenge overall as an author?
I would say probably promoting myself because I'm not I wouldn't consider myself necessarily an introvert, but I don't like really selling things. I don't
Mhm.
want to sell somebody on something, and being an author, you're basically selling yourself. You're selling your ideas, you're selling your books, you're selling your brand, you're selling, yourself basically to people like and I think for me that's been the most difficult thing because you have to do a lot of promotions. You have to learn. I feel a lot more comfortable with a lot of these things, but yeah, I think learning how to market. I don't have a business degree. I was a teacher. I love science. That's where my interests lie. And so, learning how to do ads, learning the business of just being an indie author, and even, my sister, even when she was with a not a big publisher, but a well-known, respected publisher, she still had to do all of the marketing and sales on her own. And
Mm.
so, even after my first book was released in 2018, I'm still learning. Like right now, I'm doing another Amazon ads class, and you have to learn how to do that if you want to sell books. It's something that you have to learn as an author, and it it's not my favorite, but it's interesting. It's another form of storytelling. And so I'm just trying to trick myself into liking it.
It is totally a different form of writing. It's copywriting, really.
Yeah.
You're right, it's a different type of storytelling. So, yeah, it can definitely be a struggle, and, like, that's actually something that I've gotten a coach for.
Hmm.
So it's been really
Mm.
interesting to, like, learn that it's okay to market my stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, that's like a weird, isn't that a weird thing? I never thought that that would be like what bothered me about
Yeah.
being an author. But yeah, I probably spend 60% or more of my time doing the other stuff,
Mm,
that has nothing to do with writing, that has nothing to do with editing. It's just purely the business side.
yeah, yeah, and it does. It takes up a lot of time, absolutely.
Hmm.
And so do you feel like you have any, like, specific habits that have helped you to be successful in your author business?
Yes, and I'm not going to say I'm great at them.
That's okay. No.
um, things, okay, habits that I have, I think, are like I didn't come into writing with expectations. And so I came in just expecting to, if I could touch somebody, then I would be happy with that because I love storytelling and I love it when I'm able to connect with people. So I came in with kind of low expectations. I didn't expect to be the next, Stephanie Meyer writing Twilight.
Gotcha.
I just came in thinking, hey, I've got some simple stories. I think they're pretty good. So let's try this. Let's throw things at the wall and see how it goes. I think that's one thing that has really helped me. The other thing is I'm persistent. I keep going, and I think that that's a big thing. I've seen so many, and I'm talking probably several hundred since I've been publishing. I've met them on Facebook, and then they're just gone. They don't
Mm,
get the success they want. They're done. And I
yeah.
think that like people need to realize that your first book, unless something absolutely magical happens, it's probably only going to sell a few copies, but that's okay. That doesn't mean you're a bad writer. That
Right.
just means that you need to keep going and keep learning because I mean, you talk to anybody who's started as an indie or even traditional, and you're just not selling those books. You're just not, unless you're spending a bunch on ads and say you came from a business background, um, you don't really know what to do. You need to learn the business. And that's okay, and I think that just being persistent and like, oh, I didn't know this. I need to learn it. Okay, then learn that. And then just keep taking steps forward. And I feel like that is where I think has given me an edge, because I'm not just doing a big rush and then being like, okay, well, it should take care of itself, because that's just not how this business works.
Right. No, that makes total sense. Yeah. And what do you feel like you would have missed out on had you not pursued being an author?
Oh my goodness, the community of readers and authors is phenomenal. I I can't tell you the times that I've had readers message me on Facebook, or, or in my group reach out to me, and then we end up, messaging or even talking over the phone. It blows my mind that my little story has impacted someone's life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I have one book, Carmine, that's about a woman who's a nurse, and she's taking care of her mother who has severe lupus. And the readers that have reached out to me from that, it just, like, it almost brings tears to my eyes, because they it blows my mind that I can touch people, and the fact that I have left something like that with somebody, given them even a few hours of escape, and brought
Mm.
something just beautiful into the world. It's I can't imagine not having experienced that. And even if it's one person, it was starts off with one person. I had one amazing reader in the beginning, and she still reads my books, and I think she is one of the people that has helped me, because it's tough. You put a book out there, and you know sell very few copies, but even just to have someone like that come up to me. I'll do a shout out, Jay Grange. She's one of my very first readers.
Nice.
She reached out to me, and she was just like, I just wanted to let you know I had all this terrible things happening in my life. Whatever. I don't want to lay her
Yeah.
personal life out there, but she was like, I just wanted you to know that you, like, made me feel like hope in my life. You gave that to me in your book, and it just touched me. And I was just, I mean, I can't explain the feeling of somebody telling me that, because it just, that's not what you think of when you put a book out there. You don't think you'll really you want to touch people's life,
Hmm.
but I'm just like, I don't know, I'm telling people on Facebook, look at this book, it
Right.
should be good.
Right. I hope you like it. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's an amazing feeling to have somebody reach out and say that it, touched their lives and made a difference for them.
Yeah, so I mean, connections, some of these connections, I'm very good friends with some of my very first readers. And yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. And so, what actually helps to inspire you when you're not feeling particularly creative?
I would say I'm a big, I know it's kind of ironic, but one of the things that I found that actually helps me cope with a lot of my health problems is exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a big proponent of exercising every day.
Nice.
And I I live right by some lakes in the Colorado River, and when the weather's good, I try to walk every day. And so I'll just walk outside and look at the trees and look at the river and look at the lakes. And honestly, I think that's when my biggest and best ideas have come to me. Is just being outside, or just getting your heart racing. Like, I'll even exercise inside. I ride my bike inside and do it with like a Zwift. It's like a virtual reality with your trainer on
Oh,
your bike, so it looks like you're riding places.
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I'll just be writing, and I'll, like, get an amazing idea, and I'll be like, "Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah, I got to do that." So those are those are probably the best ways I get ideas.
Mm.
But also, I have to exercise to, just maintain my health. And so it's wonderful. Like, it's good. It's really bad if I don't exercise. It's like everything goes down the toilet.
Yes. No, I totally hear you there. And what advice would you give to someone who's thinking about writing a book and building their own author business?
My advice would be to educate yourself first. Do as
Mm.
much research on the genre that you want to write in. Do research on the authors that are best-selling authors in that genre. Research how their blurbs look. Research how the structure of their book is. Okay, just for the record, I haven't really done much of this. I should do more of this. But if I were gonna, if I were gonna start out, if I were gonna start again, this is what I would do. I would, yeah, research the covers. What do the covers? I did do that. Research the covers. What do the covers look like? What are the base themes that, like, books in your genre really should have?
Hmm.
And really get to know those books and those authors. And if you don't like that, then maybe you shouldn't be writing those books. I know that sounds harsh, but you've got to really like what you're writing, because this is hours and hours, not only writing, not only plotting and writing and editing this book, but also probably, like I said, 60% more time. Like that's only 40% of your time. Then the 60% rest is marketing this. So if you don't love what you're doing, you don't love this genre, then maybe you should choose a different genre.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
I'm sorry if that sounds harsh. I just like to tell people how it is, because I'm one that I think it's good to know, to have your eyes open when you go into something.
Mm. Yes, and I do think there's such a push around the overnight success, right? Oh, this person just
Oh,
published their
yeah.
first book and they suddenly seem to be number one. But then when you dig a little deeper, you find out that they're publishing that under a pen name and they've written like 10 other books under a totally different
Yeah.
name. So yeah, so I think it's very easy to become disappointed. Um,
Yes.
by trying to jump in and not being successful right away or not doing the research like you said and then just winging it and then creating something that you spent hours doing and then it's not quite the right fit for that genre.
Yeah, no, and I've seen this before too. For good or bad, I've had a lot of new aspiring authors reach out to me, and I try to give them as good of advice as I can. But I've seen a lot of people that I can tell that you've never read a book in this genre. I can
Mm.
tell, and it won't just be me, because I read probably a book at least every day. I'm a very avid reader. When I'm really heavily writing and editing, then I won't read, but on average, I usually read at least one book a day. So I know my genre. I know where I'm at. And you know what? Your readers will too. So it's like if I pick that up, I try to be very careful. But yeah, that research, getting to know what is in your genre and what is your category. I don't know what would I call this? Just your industry. You have to be on top of that. That's why you said when authors seem like they're an overnight success, even though they've written all these other books, it's because they know to do all this homework. Do you know what I mean? They've climbed these mountains. This isn't their first rodeo. They've been to a few more, so they know what to do. And I think that's a big thing. Like, my most successful book was not my first book. It was a different series in a genre that I actually wrote in, because it was a kind of a, what I want to call it, just kind of an escape from my other stuff, and I
Mm-hmm.
did it for fun, and it was something that I read a lot, and so I think it just came more naturally to me to write that, and to, because I was more aware of what was going on. Plus, I'd been in the business for a few years, so it's like I wasn't just brand new.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, where can we learn more about you and your books?
You can find out more about me on my website, www.tlchristianson, Christianson.com. Also, I have a book, Frying Night, which is the fourth book in my Dragonborn Academy, coming out on the
Ooh.
23rd.
Ooh, and that's young adult fantasy.
And it's always funny when people say young adult, because my probably main group of readers is between 20 and 35. And that's not to say
Okay.
other people don't read it, but I think it's funny. We always call it young adult if that's the protagonist in it. So
I think there's still a little bit of a taboo, right? Of like admitting as an adult, as you know, I'm in my 30s,
mhm.
that I still read YA because I think it's really fun and I enjoy those stories.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of, primarily women, but I'm sure men too, tend to read that. And some folks I think are embarrassed to admit it, but I enjoy those kind of stories.
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, they actually just did Shadow and Bone on Netflix, and
I
that's
know.
considered young. Oh my gosh. Yeah, if you haven't watched that, you're
I
missing out.
I
It's
just
so
started
good.
it, so I haven't read it yet. So this might be the going backwards, but that's all right now.
That's okay. It is kind of almost a taboo thing, and especially when writers, or somebody says, "Oh, you write young adult,"
Mm,
or "Oh, are you trying to write the next Twilight?" Or even when somebody's reading it, I think it's so associated with, "Oh, no, I'm reading this for my kids."
mm.
You almost feel like you have to justify it, but I think we're thankfully coming into a time where people are more aware that young adult and new adult, which new adult's a new genre, are books that older people like to read. It's enjoyable. It's a really neat time of life. And I think it's just makes things a lot more exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing a lot more of that on TikTok. So I think, a lot of readers on like Book Talk and even Author Talk, they're much more willing to
Yeah.
say, no, look, I read this. And it just makes it more acceptable. And speaking of, you have a TikTok where we can follow you. Yeah.
Yes, T.L. Christianson.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much. It was really fun.
Such a fun interview. I am loving getting a chance to talk with these amazing authors that I've had on so far. So, super fun. Something that really resonated with me on a personal level during this interview was when TL talked about her path to really focusing on becoming a writer and how her health crisis actually acted as a catalyst into her shifting to really focusing on her overall goal of becoming a published writer. However, when I started and on like thoughts on this and what really resonated with me, it sort of ballooned into its own separate post. So I'm actually going to, instead of talking about it here, make it the focus of next week's episode. So episode number 52. But something else that stood out to me from the interview with TL was when we talked about letting ourselves enjoy the things that we like, even if society tells us that those things are stupid. So I know our talk was mostly focused on like allowing ourselves to enjoy specific types of book genres like romance or, reading young adult books, which are also known as YA, even though we no longer fit the target age range for those books, but we still enjoy reading them. For some reason, society seems to like look down on reading that kind of stuff, which is kind of ridiculous, right? Like people should read what they want to read. As long as they're not like hurting anybody, then I feel like it's fine. Actually, at the moment of making this podcast episode, the guilty reading pleasure that's currently making the rounds on TikTok is a sci-fi romance series called Ice Planet Barbarians. So it's basically blue aliens, right? And it's the kind of series that previously people would secretly read and enjoy, but never admit to reading because it's kind of seen as like embarrassing to enjoy that kind of genre. But now, people on TikTok, primarily women, are openly saying, hey, I've read this and I enjoyed it because I don't care what you think of what I read and enjoy, which I kind of think is great. And, I say it's a quote unquote guilty pleasure, but I feel like that's really kind of an outdated term, right? Like, there shouldn't be any guilt involved with it. As long as what you're doing isn't hurting anyone, then I don't see the need to feel guilty for enjoying something. And without digging too much into this, because honestly, it could easily become its own episode, it's important to note that historically, things that women have enjoyed are seen as womanly, right, or feminine, and aren't taken seriously. This is especially true for teen girls. And there's actually a slew of articles out there about how we seem to find it easy to mock anything that a teen girl likes, no matter what it is. But I digress, so we'll focus back on the books, right? So going back to what books and the romance genre as a guilty pleasure, when you think of romance as a genre, if you're like me, then you probably think of like bodice rippers, right? Or maybe even erotica. And you might even think that not very many people read them. But the reality is that the romance genre is the top-selling genre at $1.44 billion a year, guys. The next closest genre is crime/mystery, and that's only at 728 million with an M, right? Like that's a huge gap between the top seller that is seen as a guilty pleasure and the genre that is seen as acceptable. That's crazy that there's such a huge gap. Another example of a guilty pleasure is something like cosplay, right? Where you basically dress up like your favorite character from a book, movie, or video game. And that's it. You're just dressing up and pretending to be them. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you talk about that, talk about yourself doing that, talk about other people doing that, in like society, it's been seen as weird. And if you enjoy cosplay, you might think that you're the only one who does until you go to a convention where almost everyone is dressed up as their own favorite character. So here's my takeaway from this. If you have a quote-unquote guilty pleasure that you enjoy, embrace that shit. Because chances are there are millions of other people out there who also enjoy that same thing. Hell, you might even know someone in real life who also enjoys that thing, but they're just too embarrassed to talk about it. And if it's something you enjoy and it doesn't hurt anyone, then keep enjoying it and try to stop feeling embarrassed about it. And if you don't know anyone who also enjoys it, embrace this amazing technology age that we're currently living in and find a group online who you can talk about it with. Stop seeing it as something to feel guilty about and just see it as something that brings you pleasure and happiness. All right, I am off to find my fellow Marvel movie fans since that's currently my guilty pleasure. Join me next time in episode number 52 for a solo show on going after our goals. Until then, Go find out. Thanks for listening to the show today. I hope you found the information beneficial and that it helps you tackle your own Go Find Out goals. You can find more episodes and the show transcripts at gofindoutpodcast.com. You can also let me know what you thought of the show by tweeting me at GFOpodcast or follow me on Instagram at GoFindOutPodcast. That's it for today. Now go find out.